I've been a Call of Duty fan for as long as I can remember, but let's be honest, the franchise has been on a downward slide for quite some while. Between the blatant cash grabs pushing everyone into stuff like Warzone and microtransactions, alongside the half-baked campaign, sweaty skill-based matchmaking swings, and even cheaters running wild, Call of Duty hasn't exactly been within its golden era. Even the huge success of Black Ops 6 really did fizzle out fast, and that's wild when you think this was one of the best-selling Call of Duty games in a hot while. So when Black Ops 7 was announced, it felt like another rushed follow-up just like the disaster that was Modern Warfare 3, and personally it did have me pretty worried. I won't lie, after seeing the dislike bombing across YouTube in general, I had a feeling that many of you were worried about this one as well. Now that I've played it though, I can safely say some of those fears were absolutely justified. So does Black Ops 7 stick the landing with a clean quickscope, or is it yet another misfire for this juggernaut franchise? Well, my name is Fletcher, and this is Xbox Nation, and let's just dive into my full review of Black Ops 7 on the Xbox Series X and S consoles. Black Ops 7's campaign is probably one of the boldest pivots that this series has taken in many years, for better and for worse of course. The entire story is built around 4-player co-op, and you can feel that design choice in every mission. When you do have a squad, the campaign does play better than going in solo, as you do have coordinated boss fights, synchronized stealth sections, and chaotic set pieces that all feel explosive and rewarding. But playing solo exposes the cracks pretty fast. Without your AI teammates, you're pretty much stuck repeating multi-person objectives alone, you can't pause because it's always online, which is pretty baffling to see, and often end up battling overwhelming enemy counts that are clearly tuned for larger groups. The story itself though barrels forward at a pretty breakneck speed, and wrapping up about 5 hours across 11 missions, and to be honest, I'm still trying to piece together what actually happened, and why this story, or lack thereof, even has a place within this Call of Duty universe. It jumps between global hotspots, twisted nightmare realms, and near-future tech labs, as Spectre 1 basically hunts down a returning villain, Raul Menendez, and the sinister tech group known as the Guild. Visually, of course, it is one of the wildest Call of Duty campaigns ever, with stuff like twisted environments and horror mazes, while later missions feel ripped straight from a sci-fi thriller. Despite the variety and aesthetics though, the mission structure leans heavily on corridor firefights and rarely ever reaches the creativity of earlier Black Ops campaigns, and it even includes maps on the multiplayer in Black Ops 6, and it all just feels so creatively bankrupt. The campaign feels torn between classic Call of Duty storytelling and a Left 4 Dead style co-op shooter. It's like the devs saw what Call of Duty was, decided to make a 180 completely, and it's something that massively destroyed the love I have left for this franchise. I never understood really why implementing Warzone style maps and armor to the campaign was ever a good thing, and it's just destroying all the last bits of style and flair that the campaign ever brought to the table. In the end, it felt like a massive slog for me to get through the campaign, and I'm just so bloody glad I never have to touch this dreadful campaign again, because honestly, it's just that bad. It all feels like a Destiny raid with wild bosses and boss fights, instead of being a more of a traditional campaign, and like I said, this is easily one of the worst Call of Duty campaigns that's ever been made. I do actually have to give this review some credit though, and that's upon the endgame mode, which can actually be pretty fun, especially if you have some friends to dive into it with. Upon finishing the campaign, or now being able to just dive into it without playing thanks to their latest update, you can be put into the map of Avalon. From here, you basically go off and complete different quests and objectives, and it's very similar to something like DMZ, but without that PvP aspect to it. This is very much a PvE experience, where there are multiple players on the map at one time, and the more objectives you complete within a sort of 45-minute window, the more powerful you get, the better rewards, etc, etc. It is very well implemented, and I've already spent quite a bit of my time within this one mode, and I do actually think is a pretty good idea, and one area that I thoroughly enjoyed. Don't get me wrong, it still doesn't make me think of the good old days of Call of Duty, but I've actually crafted a pretty fun experience here. As someone who's spent way too many hours on Arc Raiders already, it's nice to actually do some objectives and fight enemies without being shot in the back by another player, and sometimes it's just nice to switch my brain off with some mindless shooting and just completing objectives. I would be keen to see how the endgame does play out in future updates though, to see if there's more bosses, objectives, and even events that get added, as it could ultimately be one of those modes that could be a staple within the Call of Duty franchise. I would say to anyone from Activision Blizzard working on this next game, please do separate it though from the campaign at all bloody costs. As usual though, the multiplayer arrives onto the scene with the same sort of unusual back-to-back release cycle that we saw with Modern Warfare 2 and 3, and that deja vu is just impossible to ignore. This one is built on the same engine as Black Ops 6, the game looks and feels familiar at first glance, and so much more. The gunplay hasn't reinvented itself either, and visually the shift in time period doesn't really dramatically change the entire battlefield. For anyone like me who bounced off last year's installment, it's easy to assume that nothing really has changed. The moment that you do start grinding matches though, there are subtle refinements that do begin to show though, and the biggest win comes from the map's design themselves. Treyarch has actually gone back to a true 3-layer design philosophy, and is a massive return to form for this franchise. Out of the 15 core 6 vs 6 maps, only a couple feel weak, while standouts like Blackheart, Exposure and Flagship shine thanks to their clean flow and balanced engagements. Even classics like Raid and Express slide comfortably into that roster and fast pace of today's Call of Duty, though Hijacked absolutely does not. It feels suffocating and pretty chaotic and ultimately woeful. The biggest stumble this year though is the time to kill element. Call of Duty has always been pretty fast and it's been getting faster and faster, but Black Ops 7 is a blink and you're sort of dead levels of fast. Often it's so quick you barely have time to react, and it can be pretty disappointing. It may help newer players land more kills of course, but for seasoned veterans like myself, it can feel pretty frustratingly cheap. There are also bright spots though. The new mode called Overload does mix elements of sabotage and blitz into a sort of frantic tug of war over a single EMP device. It's not revolutionary like we've seen before, but it's still genuinely fun and pushes teamwork in a refreshing way. And yes, the skill-based matchmaking conversation makes its yearly return of course, and we can't ever dismiss that these days. Treyarch has shifted back to the sort of region-first matchmaking, which makes better ping but wilder skill spreads. The result? Well, players are having more fun as a result in the multiplayer, but due to the widespread result of many choosing the no skill-based matchmaking playlist, it means some players are getting pretty fed up with being pop-stomped in most of the lobbies now. It is a 50-50 scenario here, and I know it's still a contentious point within the Call of Duty community, as some even suggest there is still skill-based matchmaking within those playlists, but without that sort of fancy sort of bow on top. I don't know, my time on this one has been pretty fun so far. Of course, I've come across some awful lobbies myself, with some of the sweatiest players imaginable, but then again, some games I'm going 50-4 without a care in the world. I will say to you though, Black Ops 7 multiplayer may not reinvent the formula, but is still pretty strong within its map lineup, and renewed momentum gives it such more punch than you might expect, and it actually can be fun at time to time. The camo grind is much wider in its scope as well, and is still fairly enjoyable, and like I said, it's got probably one of the best map rotations that we've seen in recent years. Zombies though has always been one of those 3 pillars of Call of Duty, and in Black Ops 7 it once again does end up carrying more weight than it probably should. After the dreadful campaign that I mentioned earlier and a good but uninspired multiplayer offering, Zombies steps in as the strongest mode of the entire package, but even here, Activision's promise of delivering the biggest Black Ops ever does start to look a little bit shaky. The biggest surprise, there is only actually one Zombies map at launch. Last year's Black Ops 6 shipped with 2 excellent maps, including the standout Terminus, yet Black Ops 7 gives you just Ashes of the Damned. It's a strong map, absolutely, but it does instantly make the experience feel smaller than it's advertised. Dead Ops Arcade of course does return as well and offers its usual sort of chaotic fun, but it's still more of a sort of bonus mode than a core experience. Fortunately, Ashes of the Damned brings some real depth to it. Its sprawling segmented layout echoes Black Ops 2's Transit, complete with travel between dangerous zones, using the wonder vehicle named Old Tessie. The map is punishing, complex, and built for veterans who love discovering secrets, building Pack-a-Punch the hard way, and mastering hostile routes. It's also packed with so much intel, Easter eggs, and just such a satisfying level of challenge that rewards your repeat runs. But the setbacks are really hard to ignore here. Starting fresh with almost no weapons or attachments, despite the story literally continuing from last year, it does feel pretty rough, especially since many of Black Ops 7's base weapons do struggle against massive hordes. The continuation of research and augments from Black Ops 6 also does soften the blow, but early game loadouts do feel unnecessarily limited. Like I mentioned as well, Dead Ops Arcade does add some entertaining bite-sized chaos, even with its odd first-person option, but it's not the main course, which is such a shame, as it could have been way more impressive. I was hoping for the old school view, but then again, I'll have to make do with what we have at the moment. In the end, Zombies is easily Black Ops 7's strongest mode from what I've played so far, yet it still feels scaled back in comparison to Black Ops 6. Ashes of the Damned is great, but one map at launch and minimal mechanical evolution makes it hard to justify jumping in unless you're craving some new undead content. It seems to be the overarching theme with basically this entire review. Is just okay, but requires way more innovation to even be considered by many fans who jump to the likes of Battlefield, Arc Raiders, and more. Overall, Black Ops 7 is a frustrating mix of potential and missed opportunity. The campaign is a disastrous experiment that abandons everything that fans loved. The multiplayer is fun but familiar, and Zombies, while it is the strongest pillar here, still feels scaled back and under-delivered. There are glimmers of greatness, especially within the endgame mode, and the excellent map design within its multiplayer, but nothing here elevates the experience beyond good enough. After years of rushed releases and questionable decisions, Black Ops 7 feels like another chapter built on compromise rather than passion. Fans deserve way more, and this entry doesn't even come close to recapturing the magic that franchise once had. It's playable, occasionally enjoyable, but ultimately forgettable, and I just don't recommend that you dive into it this year.